This is Bumper to Bumper, the car show. Drive in anxious and cruise out confident. With the best automotive information for your vehicle. And now your hosts, Matt Allen and Dave Riccio.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bumper Radio. I am Dave Riccio, here along with Matt Allen, and together we are your KTAR car guys, heard every Saturday from 11 to noon. At Bumper to Bumper Radio, we are helping you, the motoring public, have a better overall car experience. So if you got car questions, we've got car answers. And we encourage you to give us a call at 602-277-5827, 602-277-KTAR. And if you're the shy type, you can text us at 411-923. Today on the Bumper to Bumper Roadmap, we're, of course, taking your phone calls and your texts, but also let's talk about shocks and struts. Those are one of those things that I think a lot of times are overzealously sold, and people don't really know when they need them, when they don't need them. It's also one of those repairs that, in my mind, is a lot of times done wrong. And so we want to talk about that. And no, hold on there, Nitro.
Easy now.
Pump the brakes. So, and this comes up for me because we've done a lot of shocks and struts in our shop here recently. And we had a guy in our shop about 2 weeks ago now, and he was there for a transmission concern, and we dealt with his transmission concern. He said, do you guys do shocks and struts? I said, absolutely, we do shocks and struts. He said, it's 170,000 miles on that car, and I would like to do shocks and struts. Okay. I said, let me get you a price. Called him back, got him a price, went ahead and put shocks and struts on it. Well, it came into us for a transmission problem, so we weren't really driving it considering how it rode and all that stuff. We were concerned about the transmission.
Focusing on how it shifted and drove.
So we did the shocks and we did the struts, and John, who does the final test drive on all the cars, he said, why the heck did we put shocks and struts on this car? I said, what do you mean? He said, it's got a horrible noise when you go over bumps. I said, oh, okay. And he said, yeah, one of the sway bar links, or a couple of the sway bar links are loose, and that's the noise. So I called the guy back, and I said, hey, we got the shocks and struts on there. It rides great, but every time you go over a bump, it makes noise, He goes, well, I just assumed all that would be fixed with the shocks and struts. I said, hold on, that's a different story. If you came to me and said, hey, will you fix this noise? I would have said, oh, you need sway bar links.
Right.
But you said, hey, I want shocks and struts because there are 170,000 miles on them, so we gave him shocks and struts. Well, the sway bar links was a couple $100 repair. It wasn't a big deal, but it was so annoying when you drove the car down any sort of choppy, dirty, bumpy road.
Well, and it wasn't a waste of
oh, no, he
to put
needed the shocks and struts, absolutely.
I mean, that's Dave, you talked about in the beginning where sometimes they're overzealously sold, but that's the number one phone call we get back when people, they call and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe the difference it makes in the way my car rides. And if you heard the lead-in, they said it's like a mattress, and that's the same thing with your shocks and struts. I'm a little bit sick today. My voice is hoarse here, but
he's lying to you. He's hungover too.
Well, I'm hungover and sick.
I called him this morning. I said, see you at the station at 10. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to make it there by 10. Then he said, I drank a little too late last night. Then I got a text, oh, crap, my car's at the bar, and I took an Uber home last night.
Hey, at least I took an Uber home.
It's the way to do it.
Anyway, Dave, now that you've exposed my private life to everybody,
Alcoholism.
I'll have to get even with you. But anyway, much like that mattress at home, same thing. It just denigrates over time. It's slowly, like you say, sometimes boiling the frog. Mm-hmm. They don't really know the water's hot for a while. You know what I mean?
Until you're cooked.
Then all of a sudden they're jumping. But you replace that mattress or your running shoes. You put a new pair on. You think to yourself,
yeah.
Man, how did I go so long like that? But struts and shock replacement can be done wrong, and done wrong in a lot of ways. Incomplete, wrong parts. I mean, there's a number of ways to do it wrong and a couple ways to do it right.
Well, this guy had 170,000 miles on his Mazda. I think it was a Mazda 5, Mazda 6. I lose track of all these model numbers. But he was way overdue for shocks and struts. They had never been changed out, and none of them were leaking or doing anything crazy like that, but they just were. They were like an old mattress. I mean, I literally bought a new mattress this year, and it is so amazing how different it is. But these are the phone calls that we get when they're down the road. Oh my gosh, this car is so different. But that's the way the new mattress felt. My wife and I were like, we roll over and we look at each other. We went from a queen to a king, which is fantastic. I love her, but I love my space too. And so I roll over and I'm like, this is probably one of the best purchases we've made in the last 5 years. It's epic.
Right.
A new mattress. I mean, it feels that good. And I had one recently where the guy took, we did the shocks and struts on his car, and he drove out to California and literally called and he said, this is incredible. It's like, I've got a new car back, because you don't realize how bad it's gotten. But what are some of the timelines, that are kind of normal? Because you had a website up there, Matt, that said start replacing shocks and struts at 50,000 miles, and you're like, whoa, whoa.
Of course, that's somebody selling them, and I'll be cynical. Yeah, 50,000 miles. If you got 50,000 miles in your car and someone's trying to tell you need shocks or struts, you probably should run. Now, there's been cases. I've seen a car with 13,000 miles
with a blown strut.
Under
Yeah,
warranty,
it happens
with a blown strut. But there's ways to do struts, and there's ways to do them wrong. Let's talk about some of the wrong ways and maybe some of the questions that you need to be asking the shop. Number one, sometimes like you get in a car accident, they might replace one strut on your car because that's all they're responsible to do if it got bent. That's a time when you need to get to either ask the body shop or get your repair shop and at least get the matching one on the front axle replaced as well.
Mm-hmm.
More important, when the strut, you have a front strut, but that's assembled with a spring and a mount. Those strut mounts oftentimes are as expensive or more expensive than just the strut. And the strut mounts,
they are more money than the strut sometimes.
People won't.
A
lot of people don't replace them, and that drives the cost down. But it makes it a horrible job because oftentimes that's where your noises. And
the noises are there, the
creaks
and the squeaks, and they show up come wintertime. In Matt, we say shocks and struts like people know what the difference is, and so maybe we need to slow down. Most of the modern cars in the front have struts. That tends to be the way. And a lot of them have struts in the rear, but more so you see shocks in the rear. Kind of lean that
depends.
way. But what a strut is, in the old days, you had an upper control arm and you had a lower control arm, and then you had a shock and a spring. The modern car uses the McPherson strut. And so what the strut did was it took the place of the upper control arm. You still got a lower control arm, and it kind of simplified things, and really the spring is wrapped right around the shock.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of all that. So it is a shock, plus it houses a spring, so it's a structural component, whereas before a shock wasn't really structural. It was just there to dampen.
It was just there to dampen where the and the spring, to get not people get confused, the spring is what holds the car and sets the ride height. The shock absorber, or the strut combination of, is what dampens the jounce and the rebound, the bounce of the car.
Yep. And so struts are going to be significantly more expensive than shocks.
Yes.
Shocks are very easily changed. They don't mess with the alignment angles. Struts, if you change out a strut, well, your alignment is going to be off unless you put that thing on an alignment machine when you're done. So that's a whole nother process that you got to add to it. But again, shocks, zip, zip, zip. You got new shocks on there.
I think that most cars we're probably talking about struts slightly, right around that 100,000 mile mark. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to keep your car for a while, I always tell people, do them sooner than later so that you can enjoy them. Don't do the struts a year before you're going to sell the car. You know what I mean? So do them so you can enjoy them. If you have people trying to tell you need shocks and struts and they're dangerous and your car's not going to handle well and you're going to die and your family, back off a little bit, all right? So, it does affect the steering. It does affect the stopping capabilities. It does affect the stability, but those are in extreme cases, and we don't really see extreme cases very often. But then, Dave, another thing. How many times have you had a car pull in the shop and you put it up in the air and the shocks freeze up? What happens on those cars? Honda Element, right?
Oh, yeah. How'd that happen? You got to call the customers. Yeah, we fixed the rest of your car, but now it runs like a brick house.
Like a tank. Yeah, because when you lift, and it's no fault of the shop, but you go lift the strut, now you've got that, the jounce and the rebound of the shock absorber into territory where it has never been because it's never had that wheel fully sagging, and now the thing is locked up. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of ways and reasons shocks go bad, leakage, noises, a bunch of stuff.